Hello and welcome everyone. We're here live at the Dickinson College beehives. It's been a long summer and early fall without student volunteers on campus. We really miss you all, and I'm sure the bees do too. But as you can see, they seem to be doing really well. We're here today with our Dickinson staff member, Jerry Bauer, who has been looking after the bees all summer. He was able to get out here every few weeks and do mite checks and perform health, and he even was able to have his first honey harvest in July. We got about 50 jars of honey, which were sold to the Asbel Center and then distributed to students for the high holidays here in September through the Asbel Center. So we were really excited about that. Anna Conley is on the call. She can answer your questions and field those as we go along, and I'll have her introduce the rules in a moment. But first, Jerry, why don't you give us a summer update?
So it's been quite an interesting summer. I've been helping out for the last 2 years, but being in the position of having to take care of them pretty much solely, it's really been a great learning experience for me. When I got out here at the beginning of the summer, at the end of the spring semester, the bees seem to be bearding on the front of the hive. So that means they look like they have a big beard at the entrance of them. So we weren't quite sure what was going on. We had an individual that helps out the college that looks after the bees with us and gives us his professional opinions. It appeared that we actually had a swarm in both of our hives. What a swarm means is that a number of the bees, along with the queen, left our hive. So we had looked at different options, whether we should re-queen it. That means going out buying a new queen and introducing it to the hive. But we noticed that the bees had produced queen cells. So we gave the bees an opportunity to do what they would do naturally in nature, produce their own queen. And lo and behold, after several weeks, we had a new queen. While I have not actually seen the queen, we know that there was a new queen because there was new pupa and larvae. So there were new bees. They produced lots of honey over the summer. So the bees have been doing quite well, just keeping up with them. They've been a little on the aggressive side, as any of those that have worked with the bees before, the #1 hive, not aggressive in stinging, but they get excited very quickly. And the second hive has always been a tame hive, and that has proved true as well. So the bees have done really well over the summer, and we're happy with the fact that we were able to harvest honey for the first time, and we were able to use that honey.
All right, so let's go ahead and get in here. Those of you that have never taken care of bees, just so you know what we are equipped with, we have our COVID masks. We have our gloves that go up our arms to protect over the suit, which latches in our feet and thumbs to hold it down so that bees cannot get in there. And then what we're going to do is put these hoods up that have hard screens on the front. So they zip around the side like this. We had to make sure Christian, who was recording, was sealed up here. He had a little gap to let the bees get in this way. So we just want to make sure that's sealed up tight, and then we will head in.
So when approaching the beehive, we avoid walking directly in front of their entrance of going in and out. We try to approach from the side so as not to block their flow. That keeps them from getting agitated. And we're going to use a couple beekeeping tools. You probably have all seen where beekeepers use smoke. The idea of smoke, first of all, is to calm them. The natural instinct is when they get smoked, the bees engorge themselves with honey. During this time period, it calms them down. We're also going to use beekeeping tools. I'll give one to Lindsay, one for myself. These allow us to break the hive apart and to lift our frames out. First thing we'll do is we're going to remove the top. So we're going to remove the stones. And then before completely lifting off the top, I'm going to get a little bit of smoke on the front, so as to calm the bees down. Now we can remove the cover. And we'll set the cover on top of our stone so that we have a resting place when we put other things on top. next thing we're going to do is we're going to take off the inner cover. Sometimes the covers will stick because the bees form a propolis, which is kind of like a glue. We use our tools to separate that. Very careful not to crush any bees. When bees get crushed, they send out a signal, and this can make them agitated.
Crushed bees.
So real quickly, if you notice, there's two different size boxes. These are called supers. The top two are smaller because they're called honey supers. They're this size because a full honey super weighs about 50 pounds. So you want to keep it within a certain size. The two bottom boxes are where they lay their brood and where they produce new bees. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm just going to put a little bit more smoke on the top over them. And the bees are pretty calm right now. So we have two honey supers. I'll pull out one of the frames using the tool, and we'll just do an inspection. So I'm going to show you what a frame looks like. As you can see, this frame is empty. So they haven't produced any comb on it, the honeycomb that you naturally see. You'll see the hexagonal shape here. This is a plastic frame that they use to actually as a pattern to make their new comb. But we have two boxes on here. So looking down, I don't really see any honey on this top one. So we're going to just go ahead and remove that box and see what the next box holds for us. We may or may not have a lot of honey since we've already harvested it. So I've just broken it loose. I'll give that to Lindsay. She can set that on top of our lid.
I look in there.
So there's a little bit of honeycomb here. I'm going to pull out one where they produce some honey.
Come over and look down in it.
So you can see the bees will start to form comb between these. What we'll do sometimes is we will cut it. Lindsay can cut from that side. We'll break these loose. Looks pretty good. So we're going to just take out this first one. Yep, Lindsay's going to get that side. And maybe Lindsay could show the camera where they've started to build out wax comb there.
So this white plastic here, that's what comes on the frame. But you can see if we look horizontally like that, you can see where they're starting to build elevation comb on there. It looks like a little bit of black. Is that mold maybe? This? Do you see the black?
I do see the black. I guess that's possible.
I don't know what that is. Probably not good.
Or smoke. I kind of doubt it.
Look at the black patterns on the inside of this comb on this side.
So we'll have to see what that is.
Yeah, not good.
I haven't seen that before. So we're going to go ahead and reinsert this frame back into the box. This box pretty much looks like our other box where there's not a lot of comb build out or honey. So we're going to break this box loose, and we want to go down to our next layer and examine the bees themselves.
We're going over there, Christian. You got it? Oh, but now get in there. This is the good part. There they are.
Okay, so as you can see, we have plenty of bees here. And they're actually quite calm today. I think what I'm going to do is I am going to put a little bit more smoke on them. Keep them calm. And with the way the wind's blowing, this is good. Not too much, just a little bit. We do have a crushed bee here from before.
Sorry.
So we're going to go ahead and pull out maybe the center frame here. All right, so
what are we looking for, Jerry, when we lift this thing out of here?
So we want to see if there's brood. We're going to look for capped honey. We want to be very careful and look for our queen. So as you can see, so right here in a rainbow shape is brood.
Right here.
So, and then I don't know if you can see it, but like on this bee here, there's yellow. So that's pollen. Some of these bees have it. So there's different size bees too, I'd like to point out. So I don't know if Christian can show, but this bee is a lot bigger than these bees. And there's a few of those. So the difference is these are drone bees, male bees. So their purpose is to fertilize the eggs laid by the queen. The rest of these are our female bees or our worker bees. The worker bees leave the hive, and these are the ones that will go out and forage. They also are the ones that will sting you if you were to do something to them. Male bees, however, are quite different. They don't have any stinger. So we can see that. We want to see a pattern like this, kind of a rainbow pattern. That's a good pattern. They're doing okay. That has a lot to do with how eggs are being laid. We can flip it over. We see the same rainbow pattern, but also notice this. This looks different up here than the brood. So we might wonder, what is that? That's actually capped honey. So they'll also have capped honey amongst their brood, but usually in the boxes on the top, the smaller ones, all we will see is this, which is capped honey. So this capped honey here, we wouldn't harvest because it's in amongst the brood. You can see here, this bee's actually down in here. It could be feeding.
Here?
Yep. And if you can see down in here, it's kind of hard, but there's larvae or pupa down in the bottom of these. They look like small little worms. You can see this is a capped brood. This is before they've been capped.
So that's capped.
Can you see them there?
Yeah.
So looking,
how are we going to identify the queen from the drones?
So the queen has a longer thorax. So that's what we'll be looking for. So we have to be very careful while observing the bees, especially with the queen. We don't want to do anything that could harm the queen. You can see now they're getting a little bit more excited. So let's take out another frame. Lindsay, if we could.
Ooh, Jerry. Here they come.
So this frame, they really haven't done much to. They're working their way out. They're starting to build comb on this.
But just a very little bit. This black part is still, again, that's what comes with the original frames that you buy. So they've really only built that small bit of yellow comb that you can see there.
Some of these cones are newer to this season because a few of them were damaged, so we had to replace them. Now this is a heavier frame, and this has honey in it. I can tell just by how it feels that it's honey. So Christian, if you want to come in and see this so we can see all this brown capped honey.
Wow.
So this is great because this is honey that we will not harvest this year. This is honey that we will let there for the bees to have food over the winter. We have some options. We can either feed them sugar water over the winter if they don't have enough honey, or we can feed them their own honey by leaving it in the boxes. So we can see here there's plenty of honey on this frame, and we'll be leaving that for the bees.
Okay, what's going on here? Look at these guys.
This is where they've built some cells out. So sometimes they'll do that. They won't stick to the natural patterns that they have there. In nature, bees tend to find a surface and build straight down. So normally they'll build at the comb, but we can see here they've also laid, you can see the larva there.
But is this the intent to for a queen?
Those on the bottom there are queen cells. The ones that are—
These aren't.
Correct.
Okay. So these are queen cells here, but I wonder, why are we seeing those? Why are we seeing all these?
They constantly produce queen cells just in case the queen stops producing correctly. So the bees will know on their own if they need to replace their queen.
But because we're seeing the larva and the eggs,
Means that there's a queen that's
active.
Active, correct.
Right now. Okay.
So even if we don't see the queen today, we know that there's still a queen in our hive. I'm going to work towards the center. Actually, I think I'm going to...
Anna, are there any questions that are coming in? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. No one's asked a question yet. I put in the chat for everyone. If you want to ask any questions, feel free to just ask out loud, or if you want, you can put them in the chat.
Yeah, and just say, Lindsay, we have a question, and get my attention while we have said thing out. That way, you know, if they have a question of what they're seeing live at that moment, we can address it right then. Yeah, they are worked up. Do you need more chips in there? There's hardly any smoke coming out.
Yeah, we're just about out of chips.
I'll go work on that.
We're going to work towards the center. The outer edges, a lot of times, are typically honey. So I would like to see if there's anything going on closer towards the center of the hive. Okay, so here we can see more capped brood, which is a good sign. The bees here have laid. It's not the greatest pattern, I'll have to say that. The pattern's okay, but this is something we want to keep an eye on to make sure that she's laying in a very uniform pattern. The pattern's a little off. However, we do see more capped honey here on both sides, which is a good thing. We flip it over here, we see capped honey as well. And we want to be very careful, like we mentioned before, that when we replace the frames, we do two things. One is we put them back where we found them. And two is we don't crush any bees in the process. I think at this point, what I'd like to do is I'd like to remove this box, and let's go down to the next level and see what's going on. So Lindsay and I are going to break this loose. That corner. All right, so these are a little heavier. I think we're off there, aren't we? And I also have to be very careful that I'm not crushing any bees as I do this.
Wait. You got to frame this.
Now you can see the frame came up with that.
Got it.
Because the bees will sometimes glue the boxes together. That's what they would do in nature.
You guys can hear how much they're buzzing. You can tell that they're pretty angry right now. So Jerry's trying to calm them down and leave them alone, you know.
Right, we're going to let them alone for just a minute here. All right, let's.
You're pretty wild right now, Jerry. Oh, jeez.
So I believe the orange here is what is commonly referred to as bees bread. As they put this pollen in these, they'll leave those as food stores, kind of like meat, but bread for over the winter months. So you can see there's caproot here, and we see down in here there's bees bread. And if we can turn this over, once again we see the same. You can see the contrast between the caproot and the bees bread. And so far I've not seen the queen.
Your phone's just covered.
Yeah.
A lot of bees. So how many bees do we think are in this box?
I would probably think around 60,000.
I was going to say 50,000.
50 to 60,000.
Yeah.
Remember, we had a swarm out of this box, so that meant that approximately half of them left at the beginning of the season. Much the same here. So bees bread, some capped brood, same on this side.
No?
No, that's still no sign of the queen.
When we bought the bees, the queens came marked, which was wonderful for amateur beekeepers like myself. It had a big red dot on the back of the bee, so when you would pull it out, you would easily be able to identify the queen. We actually have markers that we could mark the new queens if we found them, but these queens they were generated within the hive, so we haven't had a chance to mark them. So now we're looking at it kind of blindly. But marked queens are kind of a nice feature for people just getting started.
So here's a good one. If you can, let's see if we can get the lighting right on this. You can see the larva in there.
Here, the white.
Yep. And the cap brood. Don't see a queen.
Look at these guys carrying this pollen on their legs. Though.
Yep.
I love that. Any questions in the audience?
I've been looking too for varroa mites, and I haven't seen any on any of the. They'll usually attack the larva,
Okay.
and I haven't seen any. For any of you wannabe beekeepers that are thinking about this, even though there's all these bees swarming around us, we're totally safe. These suits protect us. We have no issues. The first couple times it might be a little bit disconcerting with all these bees flying around you, but you get used to it.
Christian
would know to give
Christian,
his
this
own
is his first
personal
time.
experience.
My heart still races when my face shield covers in bees. I get a little, you do trust the suit, and we're not, they're not stinging or totally angry, but it is an interesting feeling to have this many so close to your face.
So another thing we'll kind of explain about beekeeping. Some of the issues that beekeepers are experiencing in the United States is a mite that came from the island of Java. It's called the varroa mite. So this little mite sucks blood. So beekeepers are constantly worried about looking for varroa mites. We look at the larvae because that's what they attack. But so far I haven't seen any of the varroa mites here. The construction of our beehive is also designed to look for that. On the bottom of this hive is a screen board. So if there's any varroa mites, when the temperature gets hotter, the mites will drop off down there. At times we'll do a mite treatment where we might have to use a wild insecticide during time periods while we're not harvesting honey, so it doesn't affect the honey. But the mites will also fall down below that. So that's another thing that we're constantly looking for as we open up our hive boxes. The bees will naturally produce a glue. As you saw when we tried to get the boxes apart, they were glued together. In nature, they would do this anyways. They would line the walls of a tree with propolis. So they do that by nature. They try to glue everything in place so it doesn't move. So that's why you'll see sometimes it's a little difficult for me to pull the frames out. And when possible, we try to clean that off so that the bees don't continue to do that. Which, as you can see, there's lots of bees here right now. I'm a little upset that we're disturbing them, but this is okay. We're not doing any harm to our bees here. We're going to get ready and put the other boxes back on top of this, and maybe we'll take a minute to look at the other box to see how the bees are doing. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to smoke this so that the bees get off of the top of the. Maybe I'll have Lindsay do this for me. That way I can lift the box. And I'm going to get a brush real quick. I really want to avoid crushing bees for two reasons. One is we don't want to hurt the bees, but second, when a bee is crushed, it sends out pheromones to tell the other bees to go after whatever's crushing them.
See how they all sort of retreated into the frames.
Sorry for the noise. It's really loud. Okay, so that was our first time. Lift off the lid.
Jerry, since you didn't see the queen in the last hive, is that something you're worried about?
What was that?
Since you didn't see the queen in the last hive, is that something that you're worried about?
I'm not. There's 60,000 bees. I didn't want to disturb too many. The fact that we saw larvae tells us that there's an active queen. If we didn't see any larvae or cap brood, I would be concerned. That's what happened at the beginning of the summer. We didn't see any action. They were just producing a lot of honey, but they eventually produced the queen because then we started seeing cap brood as well as larvae.
Yep, Mike. So nice and calm at the top. So nice and calm.
Okay, so I will say that I am concerned about this particular hive. This hive always has seemed to have some issues. we didn't harvest any honey from this hive. So this honey super on the top should be built out for the winter. However, so do you want to show that, Lindsay?
Anna, what are you seeing in those combs?
I see very little capped honey, if any, honestly.
Yeah, there's really nothing. So, you know, it's just a hollow comb. So this white frame is what it comes with. Then this clear comb is built on top of that. And our hope is there's either, you know, in this super, we would want honey in these, and in these bottom ones, we would want babies, eggs or larvae. And it's really just comb at this point.
We're getting the same, you notice this comb here? It's black.
Yeah.
So we need to find out why we're getting some black honeycomb. What's causing that?
And typically the bees, remember, they'll start with the middle frame and work their way out. So the fact that this middle frame does not have any honey in it, this on when, like June?
Yeah.
So June until now, they have not filled out honey in this super is not good.
So there might be honey in the super below. That's what we're hoping to see. We're going to have to feed this over the winter if there's not really any honey, so that they'll be able to survive.
And Lindsay, Natalie just asked, how many queens did they say there are now?
How many what?
Queens.
Queens?
So it would be one queen per hive.
Right, because
Right.
they'll kill a competing queen. So if a hive produces a new queen because they don't like the other queen, they'll kill that queen and drive it away.
Why wouldn't they like the other queen?
They can tell if she's not like laying enough eggs, if she's not producing correctly.
If she lays out of order, lays the eggs out of order, they can kill her. You
They're
know?
just
Like
instinctively wise.
right,
Oh.
they have a path that they want her to reproduce, and if she gets off that path, they get angry. So yeah, there should be one active queen here and one active queen here. And when you don't see them, it's okay as long as you see the eggs. That means a queen has been there very, very recently.
So Christian, can I take a look at this right now? So we can see they're actually rather calm right now, considering we just ripped off the top box, like taking the roof off your house. So this will change quickly here because we're going to start removing frames, but I'm going to have Lindsay smoke this a little bit. And we're going to look at a couple of the frames closer towards the center.
And keep the questions coming. If you see something you want to know more about, just type it in and Anna can relay it.
Okay, so let's see what we got going on here.
That's supposed to still blow.
Excuse me?
Is it supposed to keep
burning?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the,
Yeah. Yeah, it's just some cedar chips inside. We can show them, you know, and then it just blows the air through. But yeah, I can't make it stop burning.
Okay, so I am happy because look what we have here. This is a nicely laid pattern of brood. Capped brood.
This is all capped here.
We got some honey in the corner, capped
This is
honey. So they're producing a little bit of capped honey for themselves. On this side, look at that. Lots of capped brood and honey in the corners. This is actually what we want to see. At least this frame has a better pattern than the frame in the first hive we were looking at. So I'm happy. That means that we have a queen, or we won't have all this capped brood.
Have we seen any eggs, Jerry? We need to see eggs. To be happy.
I would like to look for eggs, so we're going to set this one down here.
Natalie also asked, do we know where the swarm went this summer and where the queens formed their new hives?
No, we do not. All we know is the day we were here, Jerry saw the bees bearded and really angry. And when we came back, there wasn't as many bees. So we know they left, but unless someone calls and reports it to you, you wouldn't know where they went, and we didn't see it. one year, so I guess it was summer 2019, the bees did swarm and ended up at a house right catty corner to the railroad tracks here, and we did go get them and bring them back. So that was kind of a fun adventure when they swarmed. But we are the only active beehives in the borough of Carlisle. So if they would go to one of our neighbors who we've worked to build partnerships with, they would likely call us and let us know that there's a swarm of bees on their property. But if they went further than that, we didn't hear about it this summer.
So once again, nice cat brood, nice laying pattern, a little bit of honey in the corners.
Wait, who's this? Just a drone?
Just a drone.
All right.
Same thing here, looks nice.
I have issues identifying the queen. I think every drone is a queen.
I have the same thing. You have to look really carefully.
When I see the queen, I know it makes it obviously it looks different than all the others, but until you see it and remember what it looks like, all the big ones look like a queen to me.
So I'm going to take, and we're going to look at the box below this. I don't see the point of pulling out each of these. We know that they're doing a good laying pattern here. I'd like to verify that in the box below.
Let's get this one back in.
Which one? Oh yeah, yep.
There's also a question about what brood is.
Brood, baby. So a larva that is, or no, not a larva, an egg that is tucked in there and then capped, and that's where they kind of grow to until they become a larva where they come out and start eating. So yeah, brood is just another word for a growing baby egg.
Now this box weighs about 50 or so pounds.
How much does it weigh without all the bees?
With all the bees, it's about 50 or 60 pounds.
It's the honey that makes it really, really heavy.
All right, so we're going to go to the center here. All right, so my guess is the queen is up there in the box above us. What do we notice here? Not a lot of brood. A little bit of bees bred.
The bees aren't in as many or as tight either.
Now, same here, no honey. Not much of a pattern. So my guess is that they started building out the box above, which we call the super. So this is a center frame, and that's where we would expect they usually move their way from the center out. We'd expect them to most likely have built that out. So let's grab another one. We'll grab one a little bit further out just to get an idea and see what they're doing there. Oh. So we can see this one, they really don't have any brood. A little bit of bees bred. Same there, lots of that. So they're preparing for the winter. That's winter stores that they can feed on, which is good.
Any questions on what we're seeing on a frame? Anyone out there in the audience?
Now what we can do is sometimes they'll start to build below. We don't really want them doing this. There's nothing really in there. We'll scrape that clean. We try to keep our frames clean.
When they build like that, is that a sign that they don't have enough comb or room to build?
No, not really, because we know for a fact looking here, there's plenty of comb for them to build out. But it's just what they would do naturally. bees will start from the top. If you think of a tree trunk, they would enter a tree trunk where it's open and would build down. So by instinct, they always want to be building on the bottom because instinctively they think, well, I need to start building further down. That's why sometimes when we remove one box from the other, they fill the gap between the box on top and the frames on top with the ones on bottom to make it one continuous comb going down. So as beekeepers, to prevent this from happening, when we take the boxes off, we look to see if there's any big buildup of that, and we will scrape it off so that that new comb or propolis that's coming on like this, that's off. And we're always careful to make sure we put the frames back in the same slot where we took them out. Avoiding, if at all possible, not to crush the bees. What we've done is a typical bee box, they're called supers, will hold 10 of these frames. We've reduced that to 9 simply because we're in here as for teaching, that they're farther apart, it isn't as difficult. Because you can see there's not a lot of space here. They pretty much touch each other. We could fit another one in, but it makes it very tight. A commercial beekeeper would have it filled because they want to get as much honey, as much product as possible. But we're doing it for teaching purposes, so that's not our sole purpose in doing this, of harvesting honey. So we give them a little bit more room, which is also good for us new beekeepers. I'm a new beekeeper. It gives me an opportunity to get the frames back in without harming the bees as much.
Do you know if they produce like better honey when they're not like packed in there?
I don't really think it has any.
The honey's really driven by the plants that they have
Okay.
the most access to, the time of year, and the species that are there. We have harvested honey twice from Dickinson's hives. The honey has looked and tasted very, very different both times. One very like clear and light, and one very dark and heavy. You know, it's kind of like a beer. You know, it's the same basic ingredients, but depending on how they're mixed together, it can be really different.
I think we're going to let this hive alone. We're going to put the boxes back on. I will still say that this hive, in spite of the fact that it looks like a lot of bees are swarming around us, are much more tame than that last hive.
Yes.
That other hive, bees would not have been here. They would have been in our face. So this hive, each hive has its own personality. Something you learn, and when you go to that hive, you realize how you need to act around that hive. Put some smoke on it,
Yeah.
and then brush it. Let me know when you're ready.
And why wasn't there that much honey, do you wonder?
Why do we think there's no? Why are they not making honey in here? Maybe because the honey's. I don't know. I don't know.
It could be any number of reasons. This also had to produce a new queen.
So there was a lot of flowers here in April, May, and June. And at that time, this hive was really struggling without a queen. So it may have missed like the good flowers, you know, I don't know. We didn't really put the honey super on until the flowers were gone.
This beehive has had issues. Last fall, we thought we were going to lose it. But in practice, it's survived. So, despite about having a lot of honey, I'm really happy that this hive is still alive and prospering. Hopefully, after it goes through this winter, we'll be able to get honey from this hive.
And each summer there's something called a dearth. So it's basically when all the flowers die off. It's usually in the dead of summer when it gets really hot. And I think that's when we hive started to do well again with its new queen, but it made it hard because they didn't really have all the access to the flowers that they needed.
And remind me, why does the smoke calm them down?
Why does the smoke calm them down?
Why does the what?
Why does smoke calm them down?
So bees communicate with pheromones. So the smoke, they believe, disrupts those pheromone signals so that they can't communicate. And instinctively, when they smell smoke, they engorge themselves with honey because they feel as though if there's going to be a fire, they need to save honey for their brood. So they engorge themselves. So at that time, they're more concerned with survival than stinging.
Look at this guy. Aren't they amazing? Look at him. Fur.
Do you also call them princesses?
Yeah.
Like, no?
Yeah. Princesses that work really hard.
Another interesting fact is it's believed that bees can see color. They can actually recognize the color of their hive. So if we paint hives using pastel colors, because we don't want them to overheat. If you painted them black, they would get really hot. They have to keep themselves cool. So as you notice, we use different pastel colors. We put some artwork on here, but it's believed that the bees can actually recognize their own hives.
These were painted in partnership with the Dickinson Arts Collective.
And the bees go through stages in their life where they work different jobs. So when they're finally old enough to leave the hive, they actually fly around the hive a couple times to be able to recognize it for when they come back after bringing back pollen or nectar or whatever. Jerry, do you want to go into a little detail about like those stages in their life, like what they do, their jobs in life?
That's their
Do
stages.
you want to, yeah, the stages of life.
If I know all the stages of life. So it's they lay them as an egg. Then that becomes a pupa. Then when it comes out, they're in the brood stage, and they come out of that, they're a larva. So they look like a little white worm. And after that, then they're either a female or a male bee. So I believe most of the male bees die off, if I'm correct, by the winter. Male bees, a lot of times, are thrown out of a hive by the females. The females are the real workers in a honey hive. They're the ones that do all the foraging and go out. A queen's life cycle, a queen might be there for several years, or when the hive decides that it's no longer performing the actions that it should, as we've mentioned before, they'll make a decision to re-queen. They'll produce a new queen and get rid of the old queen.
Do you know if that's something they communicate among themselves, or does one just like take action and then they're all?
I don't know.
I don't really know.
Okay.
I know a lot of the time it has to do with age of a bee. So like I forget like what comes first or anything, but I know that basically every bee, like every worker bee, is a nurse at some point and then is like a mortuary bee at another point, like a cleaner, and it's like stages of their life, and it has to do with how old they are.
That sounds right.
How do they get rid of the queen?
What'd you say?
How do they get rid of the queen?
They can kill the queen. They can attack her. They can drive her from the nest. Normally, they'll kill the queen.
Is there other questions from the audience?
How often do you do this process? When will the next time be that you do this again?
So it varies beekeeper to beekeeper. Some of you might know Stephen Wynn. He's also a beekeeper here on campus. He tends to only get into his hives on a monthly basis or even less. The hive, the club, the group, the organization here, during the school year, we might go in during the times which the hives are active every 2 weeks. It all depends on why you have hives. Like, we're doing it as a learning experience, so we check them probably more frequently than a typical beekeeper would. Every hive's different. I'm getting into a different type of hive called a Warre hive. It's called the People's Hive. You only check that 2 times a year. Once in the spring when you add a new box to it, and once in the fall when you take a box away for honey. There's a variety of different types of beehives and different methods. So that's really a question that the answer is it depends.
We will probably come back. It's mid-September, so we will probably come back in early October, and then again in early November, and then we will actually try and close the hives up for winter, provide some winter feeding, and we have some of these like a koozie that goes around the hive that can actually thermally protect it from the cold weather. So we will winterize the hives probably around Thanksgiving time.
Correct.
I would think. So maybe 2 hive checks between now and winterization. And then you really don't want to be in there in the winter months. So December and January, we're not checking on them. They seal up, they huddle in, they keep warm, and we just let them be until spring.
You also, with these hives especially, you want to go in enough to check for pests. Jerry was talking a lot about mites and how he's checking for varroa mites. So you want to make sure that they're handled and taken care of pest-wise too. So you want to check enough for that.
Right. We had done a varroa mite test in the height of the season towards the end of July, and our counts came back good. So we didn't need to do a treatment. I had done a treatment prior to inserting the honey supers earlier in the year, because I came back with 3 mites per quarter cup of bees. So we take a quarter cup of bees, we put it into a jar, we cover them with alcohol. Unfortunately, it kills the bees, but that's about 300 to 400 bees. And we strain that into a bowl, and we count the number of mites. So I counted 3. I repeated the process a few times and came back with 3 as my total count. So that was high enough to treat. When I did the same test in July, I came back with 1, which was not necessary to treat. I can look at the larvae to see if they have little red mites on them. I didn't notice any of our larvae today with any mites on them. So that was a great sign, showing that we made a good call not treating them. So the less pesticides we need to use, the better off we are. We only do that when it's absolutely necessary.
It's also good not to use it because any honey that we get when we use mite treatment, we can't use or we can't sell.
Correct.
So yeah, it's really important that we really only do it when it's necessary.
Right. If we had to do a mite treatment in July and they were producing honey, that would have been a bad thing. We would have had to remove our honey supers and do the treatment and then reinsert the honey supers.
So Anna, why don't you tell them about how they can remain involved and what next steps are for them, and then feel free to answer questions in the chat. But we will probably close up shop here and move on. But this session will be recorded so that you can continue to learn from this. And if this goes well, we hope to do this again,
yes.
Especially while we're in remote environments. So thank you for joining us live today from the Hive. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Christian, who's patiently and calmly had bees all over his body behind the camera. So Anna, back to you.